Well, guys, our little laptop soldiers have gone to war for us for 20 days. They've been locked in mortal combat with the AshMaize ASIC resistant algorithm, and many have fallen. But today is the day. Now is the time when you need to look at your laptop and ask it to throw itself into the fray of battle one more time, one more day. And if it hesitates, remind it that at the end of this day, all of the fallen shall enter Valhalla. If the only battle you're interested in is the battle for ADA to get back to all-time highs, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Thank you for joining, everyone. Let's see, who have we got in here? Emilio's here. Hilldog's here. Thank you. Thank you for that, Hilldog. Appreciate that. Monster Plot is here. Monster Plot says, I've bought a new fan to replace my busted laptop one, but it won't arrive in time to take me over the finish line. However, I am now considering trying out the Cardano DEDI app to rent out its GPU. Okay, I think I guess it depends on if you're running that non-API. I guess that maybe that's a possibility. I know we are in the final day, which means no more API mining. Hola, Rulo. Burn. Yep. I think a lot of people are happy to let the old laptops burn to accomplish the goal here, to win the war. Christian Bauman's here. Howdy. Spooky Tech says hola to everyone. B117 says, what's a good word? Thomas Kirkpatrick is here. Pucky Hawk likes the Valhalla reference. Emilio says Valhalla laptop. Yep, pretty much. And Ulrich is here. Hello. Blue Mammal is here. Bindocam says, let's go. Vamonos. Daniel Wiggins heard the word burn. Jerry, good morning. Thank you for joining from South Africa. And it is, yep, youth promo points out it is Cardano Rumor Rundown number 740. So obviously one of the big things going on is our battle against the AshMaize, which is the ASIC resistant algorithm we've been fighting against, those little cryptographic puzzles we've been doing. This has been the AshMaize algorithm. You probably know in blockchain, in Bitcoin, if you're mining in Bitcoin, you are trying to find a nonce to, which I know is super funny for Europeans because that word has a different non-cryptographic meaning. We all know it is pretty funny, but you're trying to find a nonce, which is going to be a value to add to the input, which is what's the other part of the input, which is what's going to connect it to the rest of the ledger, the rest of the blockchain. And then you're shooting for a digest, an output from the SHA-256 algorithm that's below the target value. And that's how you mine the block. That's how you're selected as the person who will mine the block. So in the scavenger mine, we're not using SHA-256. We're using AshMaize. And the reason one of the good things about using that algorithm is that it's ASIC resistant. So obviously in Bitcoin, people are not mining with their CPUs. They're not mining with GPUs. They're mining with application-specific integrated circuits, which means you have to have kind of these bespoke manufactured, pieces of hardware. These bricks, famously, if you've seen, the aftermath of like a flooded Bitcoin, mining facility, you see these like weird brick-looking things that are the miners. This algorithm is meant to be ASIC resistant. So that's what we've been fighting for the last 20 days. And some laptops have fallen. I've seen reports, even from people who follow this channel, who have lost laptops. Some laptops have died. So there are some fallen heroes in this battle. This battle was not without its price. We have paid a price. We have lost some laptop soldiers. But it's all about to come to an end. And of course, today, the last day, we all knew, based on that point in the mining when a lot of people were complaining, not necessarily people on this channel, but just people across the midnight Cardano space were complaining that obviously the API mining, the bot miners were dominating, and everybody doing browser mining was sort of feeling like they were getting left behind. So they sort of doubled, almost doubled our rewards. We went from 600 and something million, what was it, 637 million or something, night tokens would be awarded during the scavenger mine to 1 billion that would be awarded. So we got a gigantic increase in the amount we were earning with every accepted solution. And also they told us that the final day would be browser only. So we are finally here. We've lost a few, and probably more will be lost today as some people turn off their API mining and go back to pure browser mining. This might be the straw that broke the camel's back for some of those old laptops, but we're going to find out. Drop in 1234 says her. Okay. I've seen no solutions to the snapshot turn. I want to turn off my laptop, but then the Valhalla warranty is voided. That's right. You do not get into Valhalla by being a quitter. I have never heard any stories where anyone got into Valhalla by running from the battle, by turning themselves off to the battle. I think you have to die. There has to be some amount of glory involved in your death. If there's not, I'm pretty sure you don't get into Valhalla. So I think this is a good call by you, Kristen. I think it's a good call. Mission Zambia, good morning. Good morning. Mission Zambia says, let's go. Let's go, Mission Zambia. Yeah, we're going to talk about Midnight Summit. In fact, one particular part of the Midnight Summit was very striking to me. I think there were some really good discussions. I haven't watched all of them. I watched many hours today, and I want to go back and rewatch some of those discussions, but there's one in particular we're going to talk about. Ben Ryan says, let's go. Drop in 1234 says my scavenger mine stopped working. So, yeah, what's everybody's experience with that been? So my experience so far has been that my newer laptop it has a processor that a lot of people still use for gaming right now. And it's that processor, it's not a fantastic, it's not like the most cutting edge thing you would buy if you wanted the very best processor for gaming, but it's a processor that people are still using for gaming right now. So only like 8 cores, and it seems to be doing fine. It seems to be keeping up. I have a much older laptop that so I'm running 2 browsers on this newer laptop, and both of those browser miners are keeping up just fine. My older laptop that's quite a bit older than that, like, how old would that laptop be? I don't know, 5, 7 years old, something like that. That one, so far, of the 2 browsers, one of them is keeping up and the other one's not. So I think that's as of like an hour ago. But how's everyone else's experience? Is it seeming better or worse than sort of the start of the scavenger mine? Is it seeming like we've gone back to the early days of the scavenger mine before, as many API miners were turned on, or do you feel like it's also very, very difficult right now? It sounds like, so drop in 1234 loading scavenger mine data failed. It sounds like, yeah, I'm not sure what's causing that error. Maybe somebody else in here will know. Ben Ryan says, probably unpopular opinion. How painful is it going back to mining night through the browser? People cried about how unfair API mining was, but there was nothing stopping them get on board. Yeah, I mean, especially once Patty and Paul, and I guess some others, open sourced some API mining software. I mean, I don't even have a system that you were able to run their mining software on. And I just went and got my $300 worth of free credits from Google Cloud Platform, burned through my free credits. Not even all of them. I only burned through like, a little more than half of them. And I basically just set up a Windows virtual machine through Google Cloud Platform because I didn't have a PC or any other eligible OS that I could use. So I basically just did that. And so if even I was able to get it to run without even having a PC or any other eligible device, if even I was able to get it run, I'm pretty sure anybody could have gotten it to run. So it is, I guess, to be the devil's advocate here, though, it's like, a lot of people were API mining throughout the entire process. And even those of us who were late to the game and only started API mining when we got Patty and Paul's software, we've had a few days. So I think it's fair. I think it's fair for the browser miners to have today. So it is, but your point is well taken. It was painful to turn that off and go back to browser mining because the API mining was much more effective, much more effective. Hey, yo, at Cardano, what's up? Good to see you. Okay, this is an important countdown. This is the countdown. You guys will all remember the poster the other day said some fabulous amount of liquidity, trillions plural of liquidity. There's a big rumor from a credible source, according to this poster, that trillions of liquidity would be coming in 75 days or less. And I'm glad some of you are keeping track of this. We're now at 73 days. Please keep keeping track of this. I would love to see. And we're actually going to talk about one thing that I hope is not what they were talking about. I hope this is not what the trillions in liquidity is about. I hope it's something a little bit more dramatic than this, but we'll talk about it. The laptops died fighting. That qualifies for Valhalla. Yep, I agree. That's my understanding as well. Any laptop that died fighting will qualify for Valhalla. Drop in 1234 says I use NuFi mining. Yeah, I noticed quite a few people use NuFi mining. It sounded like people were having a pretty good experience with that. So I was glad to hear that. What's up? Will you be an SPO for night? I read expected staking rewards boost to 8% in first few years. Yeah, so last night we talked about the different eras of night and when the SPOs will actually go live. It's going to be a federated mainnet at first. So the SPOs aren't even going to be mining on mainnet. They're not even going to be, a part of validating the blockchain at the very start. But as soon as Night kind of launches, we're going to take a look at it. And depending on if it looks like the economics are going to work out, then yeah, we'll definitely do it. If it looks like the economics work for us and everybody involved has some time. So I'm the only one who does this channel. I'm the only person involved in this channel in any way, but there are 2 other people involved in the stake pool, and they have full-time fiat mining, very, very, very busy fiat mining jobs. So I've just got to kind of coordinate with them, and we'll take a look at it when the Night network is alive. We'll take a look at it and figure out if we can do it. I would love to do it. If it was just with me, I would definitely do it. But we've got to kind of take a look at it and make sure everybody's got the time to add, basically add another node onto what we're doing, those kind of things. So Cardano says, I'm using NuFi via proxy on just one wallet, getting some results. Yeah, I'm just using the regular Midnight Foundation browser software, and on my newer laptop, it seems to be working it basically as well as it was working, sort of on day one, kind of. Okay, Spooky Tech, thank you for that clarification. That's the number we were looking for, 626 million. I think I said 636, 626. I seem to mess that up every time. I can't quite remember it every time. They turned down the difficulty on the second challenge for the last day. Okay, good. That's great. If it works, like I haven't been able to tell. When we first started the scavenger mine, I assumed it would be just like in Bitcoin, and the difficulty would automatically adjust based on the hash rate on the network. So I'd be curious to know if it's that. That's what I would expect. If they're just manually turning it up and down, that would be that would be not what I would expect, but it's possible. You know what I mean? It's like this was only a 21-day proof of work sort of extravaganza. So I'm sure there's a lot of things they had to kind of do manually just because it was such a short-lived, sort of event. So maybe that's the case. Brian Packard, good evening. What are your thoughts on Pandora? What is Pandora? Tell me what Pandora is. I left my laptop on first week and the screen burned out, all that for 300 a night. Yeah, actually, the older laptop I'm using has a screen that it doesn't flicker. It's like the screen like sort of strobes, like the screen goes completely unreadable for like 3 seconds and then it's readable for like a second. That's probably an exaggeration, but that's how it feels like. So I'm kind of like moving the mouse around, trying to use the whenever I have to like restart the browser or something, I'm like moving the cursor around, manually entering, copying and pasting, the signatures and everything. So I feel you on this. My laptop started out that way. It wasn't a completely burned out screen, but I'm definitely using one that has like a half burned out screen. Default flag says use NuFi and had 10 hashers going. Not sure what end result will be, but was interesting. Okay, nice. Yeah, that's pretty good. If you had 10, that's pretty good. Jose Cano, good evening. Good evening. Okay, at Cardano says mined 4.5K night with nothing but browser and an old i5 quad core HP ProDesk. I do use Linux, however. Oh, that's pretty good. I think I'm going to end up with about that amount between my 2 laptops browser mining for most of the scavenger mine. And then there was that period of the last, like, whatever it was, 5 days or whatever, that I was using Patty and Paul's API mining software. So I think you're probably going to end up with like maybe even a little bit more than I got with all that. But okay. Gustavo says, got in late with 3 days left, only 16 night tokens. Hey, 16 is better than nothing, right? 16 is better than nothing. Thomas Kirkpatrick says, how much were you getting from API? So I was getting a lot. Like I think all in all, the API miner, let's see, I can probably actually find that value. Let's see. How much did I get total? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in 5 days, I got about no, wait, that's not right. Sorry, I'm miscounting. I was just about to tell people a number that I think people wouldn't have liked. Nope. Okay, yeah, no. So it looks like, and it looks like in 5 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe that's like, yeah, okay. In 5 days, it looks like I got about 2,000. Looks like I got about 2,000 in 5 days just from the API mining. And then I got about another. So on the 6th day, which was today for me, the 6th day of API mining, I don't know the total yet because I sort of turned off my virtual machine instance and I didn't look at it before the mining ended. So I'm not sure how much I got on the 6 days. So it was probably a little bit, it might've been a little bit more than 2,000 in those 6 days. And then I got about another 2,000 after today. It'll be another like 2,000 and change from the browser mining. So it's probably going to be, it's definitely over 4,000. I think it's going to be somewhere between 4,000 and 4,500 total, but about 2,000 from sort of 6 days of API mining. Okay, Spooky Text is extremely difficult compared to day one. Estimated 22,000 night over 20 browsers for the last 20 days. Oh, that's awesome. 20. Okay, so you had 20 browsers. That's pretty good. I only had about 4 browsers going. So 20 browsers, 22,000 night. That's pretty good. I think you did better than the vast majority of people, except for now YFB. 396K and counting. API is now turned off, so switch to screens filled with browser instances, all consolidated to one address. Nice. The consolidation to one address is kind of interesting. It's sort of thinking about whether or not to do it. I didn't consolidate everything to one address. I consolidated all my API mining to one address, which was just, I think I had 16 miners going. I had like a 16 core virtual machine on Google Cloud. So I only had like 16 miners going. I consolidated all of the addresses related to those miners to one address, but I left my other browsers on different addresses because if we're going to randomly get 25% tranches, I think there's probably going to end up being a notion of time value in there. Like the in airdrops in the past, the airdropped asset has been worth different amounts depending on how long after the airdropped assets hit the market, you know? So I kind of split it up. I didn't put it all into one address because I was like, you know, it's going to be someday between day 0 and day 90 that you get your first 25% tranche. If it's day 90, you know, maybe I don't want all of them in one address. So I get why people did consolidate everything in one address. So they don't have to send ADA around, you know, to get retrieve all their night for the transaction fees. But I think the time value of, you know, the receipt of your night may end up being important here too. Now YFB says missed first 2 hours today, as was asleep. Yep. I think it's probably a lot of people. Mr. iWebco DMS says, hope you are all well. Glad I brought my snowboard. These are steep slopes down downtown. True. You are probably at a bad ski resort if the snow is this red. Lord says the night consolidation craze is upon us. True. The house seems so quiet now without the whir of cooling fans. True. Very true. Yeah, I think my significant other is gonna be pretty happy when that second laptop, which is older and the fan is definitely in overdrive. I think they'll be pretty happy when I close that baby up in what is it in 21 hours or something like that. Otis Frichov, good evening. I don't know. Does anybody know, is NuFi with proxy working for this last day, or is that a form of API, or is that API mining going on over there as well? I'm guessing it is, but I'm sure one of you will know. 3,200 in total from 3 browsers. Not bad. That's pretty good. That's definitely more than I would have mined with my 4 browsers. So let's see. BindoCamp says one guy that was early on API, renting out servers and GPUs, bagged over $1 million. I saw that. Yep, I saw that. Yeah, I mean, good for that person. They, you know, I think being super early with the API mining, you know, was definitely the ticket. And, you know, like everybody's been pointing out, the API mining software was available, or software documentation was available from the start. So, you know, anybody who did that basically just outcompeted the rest of us. So good for that guy. Good for that person. At Cardano, are you saying you're selling night straight away? Perhaps a good strategy, then buy back after the initial dump? I don't know. You know, initially, as part of my don't round trip it strategy, I was thinking, you know, initially I was like, well, you know, I've seen a million of these kinds of airdrops. Not like this one. This is a cool airdrop, but I've seen a million airdrops, and you know, oftentimes speed to exchange is a thing. So that's been on my mind. But you know, the more excited I get about midnight, the less I'm very excited about midnight no matter what. It's no reflection of my excitement about midnight. But you know, what I was thinking is, as part of my don't round trip strategy was, you know, I would try to, you know, get the fiat and then rebuy at a lower value. If we were going through, that was my plan earlier when I thought we would be going through a normal crypto cycle where everything would be like peaking right now. And then, you know, 12 months from now, everything would completely suck. We're obviously not in that kind of cycle. That's not the cycle we're in. So that's kind of changed the plan. So I may end up holding on to all of it instead of, you know, what I was planning. I don't know. At this point, it's the crypto cycle is in ashes at this point. So the best strategy at this point, I think, is anybody's guess. Now YFP says, going to be holding it all anyway till at least next cycle and see what comes of it. Yeah, I think it was the founder of Litecoin really early on in my sort of crypto travels. The founder of Litecoin, he there was this saying attributed to him. I'm sure he posted it, you know, on the Bitcoin subreddit or something, one of those early places where we were all, consuming and creating posts. But he said the most common regret in crypto is that everybody wishes they had bought earlier and that they had bought more. And that's always stuck with me. That's always been in the back of my head because it's always seemed to be true. At almost every single point in crypto, everybody I talk to wishes they bought more earlier. So I think your strategy kind of goes along with that. And certainly I've been DCAing into ADA since Q1 of 2018. So, I have to say what I've done has been pretty consistent with that anyways. I guess I can turn my heaters on in the house now. Yep. Our lives are changing. We're all emerging from the AshMaize mine. I can't even. Greetings. Thanks for joining. Sub-Zero, how many night did all the solo miners collect? As of now, I got 850. By solo, do you just mean browser miners, or do you mean just running one browser? Because I think those are two different answers. I can't even says, let's see if this has all been worth it. Electric bill, killed laptop. Sheesh. Yep. Some laptops have died. Okay. B117 says pull your 9 on DEX. We must use the DeFi. Yep, that's a decision that everybody's got to make. Whether or not they want to engage in DeFi with, basically any assets in any ecosystem. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the big concern. The big concern is whether or not we round tripped it a year ago, basically. That's something I think, that may be the case. As much as I've been saying for years, everybody should try their hardest not to round trip it this time. We might have all already round tripped it a year ago. That's the big fear, of course. Otis Frichov says solo 872, but missed 3 days. Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, you can't trust these influencers. You know what I mean? It's like you can't trust any of them because they don't know. Nobody knows what the market's going to do. Nobody, very few people were calling it a year ago saying this is the top. Like nobody knows. We also had a double top last cycle. Nobody knows what the market's going to do. So you're going to see a lot of influencers trying to, be the first ones to call it done, or, I mean, it's like always every influencer who's into calling the markets, these air quotes analysts, the analysts are always trying to put out some kind of a statement that turns out to be kind of prescient so they can point to it, backwards in time and sort of an appeal to self-authority kind of thing. But none of them know what's going to happen. None of them know. Yep. I think Thomas agrees. Nobody knows. Pucky Hawk says, I'm holding. There's no reason to sell. Sub-Zero says one browser. Okay, one browser. Then, Otis Frichov says 872. Pandora brings chain agnostic intent, smart accounts, multi-dex routing, hydro-powered L2 settlement, and solver execution to Cardano with multi-chain support. Coming to check them out. I don't know anything about this. Thank you for the brief on that though. I will definitely, when I see that name pop up, I will definitely try to learn more. So that's a lot of things though. Whenever I see a project doing so many things, whenever I see them doing so many things, it definitely makes me ask a lot of questions. So I'll have to look into that. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, God, every time I hear that, I always hear I hear this often. Blank influencer has been correct about nearly everything. I hear this often. And then when I go back and check, I find them doing a lot of, like, oh, we're either going to go up or down or sideways here, or like it could be that this happened. I mean, it's sort of like the fortune teller thing, right? It's like there are a lot of ways to lead the listener to believe you knew things that's difficult to believe you knew, right? But a lot of it's in like the way you present the information. I would say if someone's been correct about nearly everything thus far, then they should have warned all of their listeners, about, a year ago being the high. They should have warned everybody about the massive drops. You know what I mean? Whenever I go back and actually look at at the content they were putting out at these times, it was always sort of like they warned people after it was already happening, or they kind of like tried to imply in retrospect, that something they said that was kind of wishy-washy should have been interpreted to mean, what actually happened. So who knows? Maybe this is the one time an influencer got everything right. But every time I go back and look, I discover that it was a lot more of the fortune teller thing, where you sort of, like lead the listener into believing that, you called the thing. So maybe I'm too skeptical. Maybe he really did call everything, and I'm just too skeptical. Yeah, apparently we're all addicted to round tripping it. If that's what happened a year ago, apparently we're all addicted to it. Pucky Hawk says, when everyone is terrified, Warren Buffett comes to mind. Buy the fear, sell the greed. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly that old saying that you should buy when there's blood in the street. That has in my experience, that's turned out to be valuable in crypto. Blue Mammal says not selling. Yeah, I'm definitely not selling anything. So, do you watch Crypto Crow? I like Crypto Crow. I don't really watch other influencers stuff on Cardano. Like I'll watch certain stuff if people are just talking about macro stuff or like crypto at large. But when their stuff is really focused on Cardano, I tend not to watch it because I want to like consume the primary content. I want to consume the actual news, the actual events, the actual developments, and then, sort of form my own thesis around that. And if you just watch everybody else's content, you sort of end up with like, I feel like unoriginal thoughts. So I like to come up with my own original thoughts. So I don't really watch any of their Cardano content creators just because I like to consume the news and then, come up with my own original thoughts about it. But I do like Crypto Crow. I think he's like he has a very endearing personality. Way back in the day before I ever had any kind of social media presence, we're talking like, probably the very beginning of his channel before he was focused on Cardano even. I definitely watched some episodes. I've definitely watched episodes of his show. I think he has like a very endearing personality. Yep, Warren Buffett. Yep, we knew. Okay, here you go. Jerry Solo 929. My dog says steak and chill, take profits, and buy Smoky Bones Tad. Mallow morning. Thomas Kirkpatrick. Yeah, and like I said, maybe he did hit it, and I'm just too skeptical. That's possible too. Mr. iWebCode DMS says, when are any of the technical guys accurate with real usable predictions? The market is going to go up, down. Yeah, up or down. Yeah, that's my complaint. It's like I feel like I feel like there's never any actionable sort of intel there. You know what I mean? It's like it's all just like kind of like they're watching things happen and telling you about the optional ways it could go and not really committing to one. And the guys who do commit really hard to something, they like hit it. Like it's a binary thing often, and their binary choice is right 50% of the time, So, okay. Kim Cha-ching says, I agree. No one knows what will happen. I still believe AI is overbought, but Cardano was the best kept secret and still got legs. Yeah, I hope the second part of that is right, that Cardano was the best kept secret and still has legs. I hope that's true. Yeah, maybe. I mean, people do go on runs. You have examples on Wall Street of, fund managers going on these incredible multi-year runs. So it does happen, but when there's so many, you have to ask the question, was this just, the one monkey when you put a million monkeys on a typewriter who writes something, intelligible in English? Was it just that kind of random thing? So, Oh, Frazek has a different opinion of Ben. He says Ben has been horribly wrong, but he acts like he is always right. There's definitely I also don't watch that person's content, but there are definitely a lot of crypto content creators who are like that for sure. They are like often horribly wrong, and then it's like a drama class watching the way they craft a narrative around how they were actually correct. So I know I said we were only going up from here, guys, but you'll recall I also said, if the following two caveats apply, you know what I mean? It's like always caveats on caveats on caveats, and then they get to a conclusion that they were actually correct. I haven't watched this person's channel, so I don't know anything about him, but Sub-Zero says, I can't wait for the next bit of good news to come out for Cardano where the broader market's been too long. Yep. Fibonacci's, yeah, it'd be a lot easier. I mean, the best way to do what we were just talking about is Fibonacci's, because with Fibonacci's, you can Okay, we're back. We're back. So sorry. Can you guys hear me now? We're back. I think I just probably touched the mute button. So sorry. Okay, yeah, looks like I was reading the comments and you guys missed a big part of the discussion, but okay, audio is good now. All right, so sorry. So sorry. I was probably laughing and I touched the mute button on the mic. So sorry. Okay, I went through a lot of your comments and I didn't cover any content while I was going on. So this is perfect timing. We can just jump right into the content. So sorry about the muted audio there for a second though. Thank you for letting me know. I guess I've got to do a better job of keeping up with the comments. So I see you guys, there were so many comments that you guys were so far ahead of me. I didn't see anybody commenting till we got clear down there. Yep. No, Taz, you did not have a stroke. My fault. I'm so sorry. Okay. Let's jump into some Midnight Summit information. So I thought this was one of the most interesting presentations of the entire Midnight Summit. So there were some really interesting panel discussions, but I thought this one was almost one of the most interesting ones. So Corn Sullied, hey there, good morning. Thank you for joining. James says FBI nachos. The Matrix. Okay, yeah, B117, watch this. So this is pretty great. First of all, I love the way this presentation started out because this guy, normally in a presentation like this, like I've said many times on this channel, I've said many times on this channel that the way I speak on the channel is mainly for purposes of, not making YouTube mad. And my normal everyday speech is much more vulgar. So I very much appreciated when this slide came up and this guy did not say WTF is Web3 fast. He actually said the words. So respect on this guy's name for actually speaking like normal human beings like me. At least maybe it's not normal for some of you, but for me and the people I'm around, it's very normal to, engage in that kind of speech. So I loved that this guy spoke normally. I hope more people do that. Maybe it'll normalize it, and then I can just speak normally on YouTube, and I don't have to worry about, YouTube like limiting the reach of these videos or anything like that. So what was more interesting though, so I like the way it started. What was more interesting is what he was presenting. So this is Web3 fast. And all I know about this project is what I saw in this presentation. I don't know anything about it. When you go to the website, you push that button right there, and it can either be sort of EVM or Compact Midnight. So Compact is a smart contract programming language of Midnight. It's basically TypeScript. We've talked about this a bunch of times. TypeScript is just typed JavaScript. JavaScript is one of the most widely adopted programming languages in the entire world, in all of humandom. It is very widely used, so Compact is great. But according to his presentation, basically the intent of this platform is for you to just go to this box right here and type in what kind of dApp you want Web3 Fast to make. Like, what do you want the dApp to do? You type it in, and then the AI under the hood at Web3 Fast sort of goes to work. You can see here, he wrote, make me an app for registering participants for the Midnight Summit Hackathon on the Midnight blockchain privately and publish the winners publicly. Then the dApp goes to work, sort of planning and understanding what it's supposed to do. Then you get the work starting to begin. The AI starts building code, and not only does it write the smart contract for you, like it would be enough if it just wrote the smart contract for you, but it sort of does the full stack developer thing. It writes the smart contract for you, and then it creates the user interface. So it basically creates this full dApp for you. I mean, this is kind of the dream. If you don't have the ability to, I think probably all of us who participate in any way in Cardano, we probably all sort of, have ideas about different things we'd like to build in Cardano. There's like various things we'd probably all like to build. And the reason we don't build those things is just like lack of ability to create the dApp. So his idea is that the problem with that is that you end up, he puts on the sunglasses and you end up in this position. He's like, sort of hand your idea over to a developer who does have the proper skill set, or, you know, don't build your dApp. He thinks we've got to democratize this process in blockchains, and that we're going to end up with sort of a richer, more vibrant tapestry of dApps if everybody can build out dApps. Because maybe there are a lot of people out there who have great ideas for dApps, but don't have the ability to build them. So he's trying to democratize that with Web3 Fast. And he's hoping that people will take Web3 Fast, build great smart contracts in Compact with Web3 Fast, build great front ends, and then we'll have this awesome ecosystem. I think this has kind of been the dream, because if I see people all the time saying, like, I even get messages from people saying, hey, not so much right now, but especially when the market's hot, like in the last cycle, I got a lot of messages from people saying, hey, I have this great idea for a dApp. And sometimes the idea was decent, sometimes it was terrible, but everybody who sent me these messages believed their idea was great. And they were like, do you know any developers who could build this out for me? And I never really had a great answer to that, because, like, obviously I do know some people who are developers in the Cardano space, but none of them would be very happy if I gave their contact info to somebody with an idea for a dApp, because they get those kind of requests all the time and they have to, kind of filter through those things. But Web3 Fast is trying to give you the ability to just build this out on your own. So obviously I haven't tried this. That website is live. As near as I can tell, I went to the front page. It looked like it was live. You could type stuff in that box. He did it during this demo. So this reminds me a little bit of what Marlowe was supposed to do at the beginning of Cardano. So Marlowe was this use case for Blockly, right? They use this interface that I think is called Blockly, and you basically just take these blocks that were sort of like bits of smart contract code in this language called Marlowe. And Marlowe was just this like no code DSL for Cardano, and you would visually just move the puzzle pieces into place and you could build smart contracts. That's actually what I used initially in the original proposal for the Army of Spies dApp, clear back in the day. So in that original white paper, I used Blockly to sort of build out, just sort of like a paper prototype of what the smart contract would look like. And so Marlowe never quite became, I think, what all of us hoped it would become. And obviously Marlowe was before the real rise of mainstream AI. But Web3 Fast seems to be saying they've done what we always wanted with AI. So I have no idea how well this is going to work. Maybe people have used this. I don't know if they were around for a long time in the Ethereum space, if maybe people have used it from over there, or if other people have used it because of the presentation today. But if this does what he says it's going to do, this could be pretty revolutionary for the sort of build out of dApps, inside the greater Cardano ecosystem, inside Midnight. This could be pretty revolutionary. So I hope it does what he says, because I think everybody's got some kind of an idea of a dApp. They might some inkling of a dApp they might want to build. And if this does what he says it does, then maybe we can all, give that a shot. So, okay. 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 AOS, can you do any dApp programming smart contract? So I've talked about it a bunch of times on the channel, but originally I wanted to see if I could start creating things in Plutus in Haskell. So I went about halfway through the 1,200 page Haskell book, and it was sort of at that time that I decided I would just wait for AI because Haskell is not an easy learning curve for sure. And I was like, you know what? It seems like you definitely need Haskell at this point. This was kind of even before Aiken, and we had some other alternatives inside Cardano, but um, I knew I wasn't. I knew there were other possibilities, Solidity in the Ethereum world and a bunch of other languages and other blockchains, but I knew I didn't want to build anything in any of those other blockchains. And after getting, like 600 pages into that Haskell book, I kind of felt like AI was going to change things. So I just kind of decided to wait. I felt like maybe I didn't even know it was going to be AI, at least not the sort of LLM based AI we ended up with. But I sort of did feel like eventually there was going to be an easier way to do it than becoming a master of Haskell. So, no, the answer to your question would be no. But according to the Web3 Fast guy, I think he would say that any of us could. So hopefully not another meld. I don't know if there's any. I don't know if it's that kind of project. Like, I don't know what the revenue model of Web3 Fast is. If there's any kind, I don't know how these guys are planning on getting paid. I don't understand that part of it. So I would be curious to find out. But if the underlying, if it really works as well as they claim it works, I mean, what I kind of expect when I see this kind of thing, what I expect is that it can build sort of simple things, and building more complex things, it can like take a stab at it, and then you need to go back and, troubleshoot problems, and during his demo, he actually shows his platform Web3 Fast running into a problem and going back and fixing the problem. What I expect of platforms like this right now is that you kind of run into a problem and it can't fix the problem, and then you have to go and do a bunch of research and basically learn how to fix it, that kind of thing. That's kind of what I expect. Was there actually a Rick and Morty episode called "Do You Want to Build an App"? That sounds familiar to me, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. So anyways, I thought this was a very interesting presentation. I hope it works. Maybe I'll give it a try. And see if I can build some things, because while I did spend a long time going through that Haskell book, long before I ever thought about Haskell, I definitely, did some really basic JavaScript stuff. I built a few, like a little browser-based game in JavaScript just by going through the Khan Academy JavaScript course. So I was actually pretty happy when I saw that Compact was going to be TypeScript, because at least I have some familiarity there. So anyways, we'll see. If this works, I think a lot of people are going to be building a lot of dApps if this actually works, but we'll see. So obviously, this is the genesis of today's thumbnail and the theme of today's video, because I think we do have a lot of fallen soldiers. So here's another very interesting thing. Daniil, thank you for pointing this out. So here we have Alfred. I believe this is Alfred, the Cardano hotel guy from Barcelona. Looks like he's on the roof, it looks like he's on the roof at the Cardano Summit here. And they're talking about a new project to send ADA via Gmail. This is kind of interesting to me, because I think, I keep sort of thinking that we're just in this like super early era, kind of like the dial-up days of the internet. It'd be like ridiculous if you go back even before sort of the AOL dial-up days, when your modem inside your computer was doing all the dialing and making the noises. You had the days before that where you actually had to take a phone and put the phone on the cradle thing, and then the cradle thing, produced the noises, and that was the communication. Like, I feel like we're in those days. We're not even to the days when the modem is built inside your computer. We're like taking the phone and putting the phone on the cradle thing to connect our computers, to any kind of network. I feel like we're in those days. And eventually it does have to be as easy as using Gmail. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction. Tarek says, the killer app midnight moment has got to involve Bitcoin transactions. If this happens, night dust will be massive and it'll be a new chapter in the crypto space. If it doesn't, 0057 night. So yeah, I think Bitcoin capital, the capital that's set up in Bitcoin, probably has to be a part of the killer app moment for midnight. But my question is what the actual app is. Is it going to be like a John O'Connor RealFi thing? Is it going to be something completely different? I'm very curious. Yeah, and I mean, like, BendoCam makes a really good point here. There are going to be a lot of lobster traps. There's going to be a lot of new people and a lot of new lobster traps out there. So we've got to be careful. It's like, I think the same rules still apply to all of this, even though there's probably going to be a lot of exciting stuff on midnight. The same rules apply. If you're giving up custody of your assets, you might lose them. If you're giving up custody in any way, you might lose them. It will be midnight. Yeah, I was definitely not. I was definitely not actually. I guess I was using computers during the time when people are actually putting the phone on the cradle thing. I was using computers, but I was not using the internet during those days. Definitely I was using, I've talked about it on the channel before, but the very first TI computer I had these little cartridge things. It was definitely, we've come a long way. I think the point is we've come a long ways from those days. We've definitely come a long way. I was just having dinner with somebody who was sort of living in Northern California in the very, 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 very early days of computer science, basically. And his mom would kind of drop him off at this place in sort of the Bay Area where he was doing, all the stuff, all the crazy stuff with the punch cards and everything. It was so early in the days of computers. But yeah, I mean, that's all within like, fairly, not even ancient guys' lifetimes right now. All that happened, within the memorable lifetime of people who aren't really that old at this point. So we've come a long ways in a pretty short amount of time. So this next thing is also interesting and pretty controversial from sort of a geopolitics perspective. So we remember we had the post the other night. We talked about it extensively on this channel. The post that this particular poster said, "Hey, I just heard a very substantial rumor from, a trusted source who says trillions of dollars of liquidity are coming into, the economy or something." Didn't really specify, just said trillions of dollars of liquidity are coming in the next 75 days. So then Charles asked the person about it on Twitter. They had a phone call and Charles immediately came back and said, he's not lying. This is huge. Then today we see this. So Mohammed bin Salman and Trump met in the White House in the Oval Office today. And they had this very weird moment where Trump sort of explained away the Khashoggi murder in the embassy in Turkey, kind of a very awkward question from the press. It was a very weird moment. And you can have whatever opinion you want on that and MBS's involvement or not involvement in that. I think whatever your opinion on that is, you can have that opinion. We don't need to talk about it right now. But the interesting thing is after that, I'm not sure if it was after or before, but it seems like, the two could have possibly been linked because Trump kind of defended MBS on that question about Khashoggi and that murder. Trump kind of defended him, and then you see MBS coming back and saying, "Hey, you know how we were going to invest 600 billion? Now we're going to invest a trillion." And Trump's like, "A trillion?" And MBS says, like, "It's definitely happening. A trillion." And I was kind of shocked. It's like, okay, that's all was required. Trump just had to defend him on the Khashoggi thing, and suddenly 600 billion, sorry, 600 billion turns into a trillion. So it made me wonder, though, was this part of the trillions that were being referenced there? Is this part of the trillions that are coming into the economy, I guess? Maybe that's what this is about. Maybe we'll get something similar. Maybe other Gulf states will pop up, and say they're upping the amount, they're going to pump into the economy. Maybe that's where the trillions are coming from. I haven't seen any follow-up from the person who made that post, saying like, here you go, here's part of the trillions. I haven't seen anything like that, but it's possible. I can't even says midnight is a make or break moment for Cardano. Really nervous about what will come of this, but hopefully for the best. Pucky Hawk says, when I was 10, a friend and I got a computer with Windows 1.1. We had a tape drive. It was amazing to download a MIDI from a cassette tape and have it work. My mind was blown. Yeah, I remember my TI computer back in the 80s that I had. There was a command, it had like a command line interface, and there was a command to make it, make tones in like a certain, hertz range. And I was amazed when I could tell the computer to make a sound, in a certain, range. And then I sit back and all of a sudden it starts coming out of the speakers. That was like amazing. Who here was using a hole puncher to double side a floppy disk? I actually don't think I know about this. So I was around during both the days of the real floppy disks, the big ones that were actually floppy, and the non-floppy 3.5 inchers or whatever they were. But I don't remember. This sounds familiar, but I don't quite remember this. The hole puncher. Somehow, if you used a hole puncher, it allowed you to double side a floppy disk. I don't think I quite remember that one. Yeah, for sure. We're going back a ways there, aren't we? We're going back a ways. Okay. So this was okay. Pucky Hawk says you punch the other side of the floppy. I'm gonna have to watch a video or something. I was pretty young when the actual floppy disks were around. I was pretty young. So that sounds familiar, but I was probably too young to be actually destroying any floppy disks at that point. So I probably wasn't quite old enough that I would have dared punch a hole in any actual floppy disk. So okay, so this was kind of expected at this point. News. It was kind of expected, but a little bit disappointing. So Brian Armstrong, he's been doing some good lobbying. Like I think there have been people who've been putting a lot of effort into lobbying in Washington D.C. Charles, of course, is one of them. Brian Armstrong is definitely one of them. And in this video, he kind of says, "Hey, we've been in Washington trying to put in some good work, and we're hoping for a markup of the market structure bill in December." That's kind of unfortunate. He says agriculture sort of put out their draft. Then the banking committee is going to put out their draft, and we're hoping for a markup sometime in December. Then he says, hopefully shortly after that, it'll make it to the president's desk. So this kind of makes me think there's not a lot of hope for big things happening in 2025. If the government shutdown means we can't even get the market structure bill through in 2025, I mean, that was sort of a given. 6 months ago, if anybody would have asked, like, Are we going to have the market structure bill before the end of 2025? A very high percentage of people would have said definitely. If we don't have that, things have gone very wrong. Now we're definitely in this territory. Even like 3 weeks ago, people were like, "Oh, we'll probably get it in November." In November, when the government opens back up, we'll probably get it. Now we're in this territory where it's looking very much like we're not going to get it even in 2025, or if we do, it might be so late in December that it doesn't make a difference because everybody sort of takes off for the holidays. So it's looking like even any kind of appreciable effects from the market structure bill may not be apparent until even 2026. So I know everything keeps getting pushed to 2026, all the expectations, plans, everything's getting pushed forward, but it's looking more and more like really everything is going to get pushed to 2026. Okay. Okay. Well, it was a square disk floppy, and one side had a square punch. So you inserted in the tape drive with that on the left, but if you used a paper punch on the other side, both sides worked. Oh, this sounds okay. This sounds familiar. So you're talking about the square 3.5 inchers, and it had that little plastic. Was it like a little plastic tab? And if you use the hole punch on the little plastic tab, is that what you're talking about? That sounds familiar to me. But yeah, so I think this was like kind of disappointing news, but I mean, we're so close to the end of November now. I guess it's kind of expected that very difficult to get anything done in between sort of mid-November and the end of December, and everything kind of ends up getting pushed to January anyway. So that's sounds like that's where we are with the market structure bill. Okay, here's another thing. I kept hearing this. So I was listening to some of the panel discussions today at the Midnight Summit, and they were good discussions. But I always notice with finance people, there's this very strong impulse to always call crypto blockchain. I noticed this sort of emerged back during the first parts of the last cycle when everybody in Washington, all the sort of policy people, kept saying things like, "I'm short crypto and long blockchain," right? And you knew immediately what they were trying to say. What they were trying to say is they didn't want to be associated with actual crypto assets, but they wanted to be able to be commentators on the space. So they were sort of like euphemistically making it sound like maybe they're only talking about private blockchains or other uses of blockchain technology that like don't involve crypto assets. Like at the time, a lot of those same policy people were predicting sort of like, yeah, I think companies are going to have their own private blockchains, but they're not going to want anything to do with crypto, that kind of thing. But you still see a lot of people in finance referring to blockchain, singular, which kind of reminds me of like talking about the automotive industry and calling it will, because you didn't want to talk about, like automobiles. It's like will may underperform this year with component prices rising. To me, that's the same as saying blockchain is really going to open up with institutional interest rising on regulatory certainty. Blockchain. It's like not really the name. It's just a euphemism so you can cover up being interested in crypto assets. Everybody should just call it crypto. It's crypto. Probably not even January, since most government employees take longer to get back to work. I'm thinking February. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but you may end up being 100% right on that one. It's, and the way things are going, I mean, we barely got out of this longest government shutdown, there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of friction across the aisle right now. So it's who knows, hopefully February. I'll be happy if it happens in February. If it gets pushed beyond that, it's ridiculous. It's even more ridiculous. But um, this is a great analogy. I'm short websites, but long the internet. Yeah, great, great, great way to describe it. I 100% agree. So I know people are just calling it, like the people in the panels today calling it blockchain. They're just using the same terminology that everybody in their industry uses. But I think we've got to move past that terminology. Okay, here was kind of an interesting post. There's a deadline. There's a deadline to consolidate. Somebody in here will know that when the deadline ends or ended, but there's definitely a deadline. Frazek says blockchains are best used in an area where you deal with an untrusted counterparty. Using a blockchain in a company would mean the company doesn't trust itself. Yeah, I agree. It's just, I mean, when you talk about private blockchains, somebody's got to explain why not just have a spreadsheet on a server? Like, why use a blockchain? Um, okay, here you go. BindowCamp says 24 hours after end of the mine to consolidate. There you go. 24 hours after the end of the mine to consolidate. So I think Mr. Telecom here of World Mobile makes a really good point. He says revenue, revenue, revenue. That is what you should be looking for in any project. Without revenue, no project has a future. So this is very interesting to me because I'm definitely of two minds, but I largely agree with this. So I think this gets lost a lot in crypto. For sure, early stage capital will always be a thing. Like there will always be investments in very early stage projects going on because sometimes people have, a great idea, sometimes a great idea plus a great team. Sometimes they've just got great things going on and they need some money to build. That's for sure a thing. But I think it doesn't change his observation that those projects should have some route to revenue, right? If there's no road to revenue, if there's no runway to revenue, not runway in the sense of like, them having enough capital to burn, but if there's no way for them to get to revenue, you have to start asking the question, how much of this business is really just Ponzi-nomics, right? If there's no revenue, if nobody knows how the enterprise gets to revenue, is the value just in Ponzi-nomics? And if so, that's probably not the best kind of project for crypto because we definitely have a lot of that going on. So I think we probably have to start paying more attention to this. And I would also add to this. I would say not just revenue, but it needs to if it's revenue that's tied to an unsustainable trend or a trend that is obviously going to get legislated out of existence, it's probably not much better than no revenue, right? Because if you can imagine there are certain things we do in crypto right now that are basically going to be like forbidden by the basically forbidden by the Clarity Act. Not even so much forbidden, but they're just going to require like a huge amount of disclosure, and you're going to be dealing with the SEC. And eventually you can get to decentralization and call whatever asset you're selling a commodity, but maybe you're going to be in that bad regulated by the SEC space. So there's certain things we do in crypto right now that may be very profitable that won't work in a post Clarity Act environment. There's also trends that come up every single cycle. And if it's one of those trends that comes up, like I think we can all say the volume in PFP NFTs, in November 2025 isn't what it was in the last cycle. The volume in meme coins right now isn't what it was during the height of the meme coin craze, right? So I think we have to be cognizant of sustainable revenue versus no revenue plan versus unsustainable revenue plans. I think all those things sort of exist in crypto. And I think we probably need to pay more attention to the projects that actually have, some kind of a plan to get to revenue. So Scolder says, I want number one. Pucky Hawk is talking about Firefly Aerospace. Is that like a legit aerospace company? Is that what you're talking about? Pucky Hawk also says, in crypto, I'm frozen. Laugh out loud. I'm not touching anything anymore. Are you referencing the character in Frozen who can't touch anything? I did what I had to do. I bought more. Why the wallets are individually linked to each mining app in each browser. Thank you. Yeah, apologies for the bad audio. I apologize for the bad audio. Jordan for America, thank you for jumping on. Jordan says, gonna wait and watch the full video in the morning. Peace, y'all. There's a period where I accidentally touched the mute button and I lost audio, so apologies for that. Pucky Hawk says, yes, sir, legit. Frazek says, you see many devs in crypto launch one project after the other because they are not sustainable. Even Bitcoin has some sustainability issues. What happens when the block rewards disappear? Yeah, I mean, it's true. It goes all the way back to Cardano to Bitcoin. Bitcoin has the same security problem as a lot of blockchains, and that's that. So the security, I think, just so people are aware, the security of the blockchains is provided, largely by the validators, and it's the hashing, the compute done by the validators in a proof of work network like Bitcoin. So it's expensive for them to provide that amount of compute. And if once the block rewards go away, the idea that was always put forward was that the transaction fees would have to pay for all of the hashing, right? All the compute that was going on. So, you would want to see a curve where the block reward is going away and it's being replaced by ever increasing transaction fees. And every time I've ever looked at this, every time I've ever looked at the numbers, we're not really on a good curve there. The transaction fees don't seem to match, what we'd want them to meet to replace the block reward. So, there's serious questions about the ongoing security of of Bitcoin once the block rewards get too small. Because what happens is when the block rewards get too small, miners turn off their ASICs. When they turn off their ASICs, the hash rate on the network goes down, and then 51% attacks obviously become a lot cheaper because it takes less hashing power to get to 51%. So yeah, it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem, and one we don't like to talk about. It's kind of like that's kind of he who shall not be named in crypto. Polygon, Polymarket, okay. I have this thing about opening up my computer's operating system and entering code into it. Yeah, I think that's probably a good instinct to have. I think that's probably a good instinct to have. So speaking of code, this is an interesting post. This is an interesting post from this poster. So this poster basically points out that, something we've known all along in crypto, but I always find it entertaining when people realize the massive difference in the architecture of a blockchain like Cardano and the architecture of the EVM world. So this poster is basically pointing out like, hey, the problem in Ethereum isn't that you guys just like ended up with more thieves over there and somehow you became the robbery forest. The problem with Ethereum is that the assets are creatures of smart contracts. So even if you're using a hardware wallet, when you interact with those smart contracts, you have to give those smart contracts certain permissions. And this is, according to this poster, this is sort of the genesis of a lot of the problems that lead to a lot of the thefts that occur in the robbery forest. And he's pointing out that in blockchains like Cardano, the assets are actually first-class citizens of the blockchain. Like Cardano native assets are native to the blockchain. They're not the creatures of smart contracts. You can use smart contracts to do certain things like that. There's been discussion around that this week in Cardano, on Cardano X. You can use smart contracts to do things like that in Cardano if you'd want to, but most of the assets in Cardano are native to the blockchain. They're first-class citizens of the actual blockchain. They're protocol level assets. They're not smart contract level assets. So you don't have this same problem. The architecture is fundamentally different, and it basically solves this problem. So once again, it's like Cardano already solved this. And one of the most important things this poster points out is that in order to fix this thing, Ethereum would have to break everything that's already been built on top of it. And, given sort of organizational momentum, you know, you already know it's very unlikely that Ethereum is going to decide, hey, we've got this fundamental problem. We're going to fix it by breaking everything on Ethereum. They're not going to make that decision. They're just going to keep going along. They're not going to rock the boat. That would be like rocking the boat. That would be like pulling out a 12 gauge and shooting a hole in the bottom of the boat, and everybody sinks, everybody dies. They're not going to do that. They're just going to keep sort of motoring along, with a million leaks in the boat, but the boat not quite sinking. That's what they're going to do. This problem's already been solved in Cardano. So I can't even says, do you see Cardano becoming the Linux for crypto and Charles the new Linus Torvald? It's like, well, the interesting thing about Cardano and crypto is that, as we know from the proliferation of cryptocurrency blockchains, there's so many on CMC. Go on CMC, you will find so many different blockchains. It's because it's not that hard to fork code, and everything in Cardano is open source, so in that sense, yeah. Could people realize that the best way to run a crypto ecosystem is to have this very, very robust and fundamentally strong base layer for settlements like Cardano, and then have a million other layers with a million other arbitrary compromises on the three legs of the blockchain trilemma? Could people realize that and just like copy, just fork the Cardano code and have Cardano be like their base layer for settlements, with the native assets that don't have to, that are, first class citizens of the blockchain? Could they just do that? And then they have all their own little different layers. That's very possible. That kind of thing's possible for sure. But there's also a lot of other alternatives. Like if you were just going off market cap and total value locked and the metrics that, entities in the EVM and Solana VM space love to use, then you'd probably want to go in the direction of Solana, because you just care about scaling and not about decentralization. But if crypto turns back to decentralization, then I could see this being the case. Okay. Lucky Hawk likes the Grok 4.1 upgrade. Okay. Yep. Streetwise, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Robbery Forest is all about getting a one-up on your fellows. Cardano is all about getting a one-up on the system. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely Cardano. The people in Cardano remind me a lot more of the people around in crypto in that 2012, 2013, 2014 time. Like the people who ended up in Cardano have a lot more of that spirit in them, and that spirit was definitely about sort of toppling the banks. I mean, you can't deny that. People would love to sort of, I feel like a lot of people who want to kind of sanitize crypto would love to erase that. But the Genesis block said, Chancellor on the brink of bailing out banks. You know what I mean? That's what was on Satoshi's mind. Satoshi encoded a message in the Genesis block. One message. That was the message, right? It was that article. That's what Satoshi was concerned about in the Genesis block. That's what it was all about. I mean, it was about fixing that problem, which, kind of necessarily involved superseding the, extant financial system. So Cardano is definitely about getting a one-up on the system. I think it has a lot more of that sort of early crypto cypherpunk philosophy in it. Whereas I think that's like kind of completely lost in the meme coin casino, kind of DeFi casino parts of crypto. Like I think in Solana, if your goal was to become the very best meme coin casino, then you're going to have fewer people who are focused on that kind of stuff. Pucky Hawk says Cardano is going to pay for my boat someday. Rulo says if by Linux you mean Ubuntu, I accept, but seriously remember Intersect joined the Hyperledger and Linux foundations. True. Yeah, that's true. And I think a lot of it's kind of funny because Charles's AMAs for a long time had him talking a lot about the Linux Foundation, and foundations like it as sort of the basis for like Intersect, so it was kind of sad. I think he had like such high hopes for Intersect, and I'm not saying anything bad or good about Intersect. I'm just saying Charles had such high hopes for Intersect, I think. And then when there was a bit of, controversy sort of about Intersect in the early days, yeah, I felt bad because Charles seemed so hopeful about all that. Okay, D9U says Charles addressed the topic of true crypto vision in his live stream titled Market. He is still fixed on delivering a true crypto alternative for the future. Yeah, I think so. I don't think Charles has given up hope of, doing that early crypto philosophy thing. I don't think he's given up hope for that at all. He's just sort of by adding privacy to it. I think he's just sort of added a new dimension to the same sort of quest. Like privacy is just a new tool in his quest to, do the more level economic playing ground for the world thing. So, we've got some Linux civil war going on here. Little Linux civil war going on. All right, guys. Well, apologies again for the audio problem. That was completely my fault. I think I was like laughing at something and I somehow accidentally touched the mute button on this microphone. So hopefully that won't happen too often. But I appreciate everybody being here. I hope everybody's having a good week. I hope you enjoy the last day of the scavenger mine. I hope not too many of our little laptops fall on the field of battle, achieving glory and ending up in Valhalla. I hope it's not too many. I hope a bunch of them survive. But I hope everybody is having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.